I started the process by making a pattern for the jacket and the shirt using fitting clothes. Starting with the jacket, I used a cropped hoodie that I had left over from a different project and traced the shapes for the front and the back. I then divided the pattern into the biggest color patches so that I could create a base that I could add the smaller details to later. I used this technique for all the sewn parts of the cosplay. Once the pattern was done, I took a photo before cutting it apart, just in case I forgot how the parts connected. With the pattern now completed, I transferred it to my fleece fabric, cut the pieces out, and sewed them together. The only smaller detail on the grey part of the jacket were these black lines that I just drew on with a fabric marker. For sleeves, his sleeve cuffs and the armor pieces, at least that's what I'm calling them, I used the same technique that I used for the main part of the jacket using some fusible interfacing for the cuffs. I didn't realize at that point yet that the hood actually seems to be attached to the shirt instead of the jacket, so I started on the hood at this time. I added some fusible interfacing into the ears for extra support before sewing them on the wrong way around, so I had to unpick the seams and sew them back on the right way. With that, the basis for the jacket was done, however still in parts for more control when adding the details. To keep track of all the details I still needed to add, I made a little to-do list. I first tried gold ribbon for the gold details, but I didn't like the way it looked, so I just used golden fabric paint instead. For the majority of his tassels, I used white tassels that I modified with a red fabric marker. Since I wanted them to have a bit more volume, I glued two together and added the gold ribbon at the top for the gold detailing. I crocheted the cords of his hoodie bands and sewed them together with the rest of the details. Since I can't wash the tassels, I used snaps so that I can remove the cords whenever I need to. For the tassel on the hood, I used my awl to poke a hole that I then pressed a grommet into. That way I could add a simple keyring to it and add the tassel using a slip knot. I did later go back and exchange the yarn for the slip knot with a shorter piece of yarn since I wasn't too happy with the length. The details on the sleeve cuffs were made using foam. After making the pattern, I cut out the front piece as well as a back piece for support out of 2mm craft foam I painted gold and black. After gluing them together, I used snaps again to attach them to the sleeve cuffs. This way I can take them off to wash the jacket and easily replace them if need be. To attach the cuffs to the sleeves, I first sewed the openings on the bottom as you would a sleeve to a bodice. After flipping the sleeve to the correct side, I could then flip the cuff to the correct side, but now I had to hand sew the excess fabric into the cuff. This is definitely not the correct way to sew on cuffs like this, but it worked, so we're moving on. For the smaller details on the armor pieces, I used my Cricut. Using a reference image, I first made the files in Adobe Illustrator and then cut the details out of heat transfer vinyl. After completing the details on the armor pieces, I top stitched them to give them a more cleaner look. In order to hide the seams on the bodice of the jacket, I bag-aligned it with some fleece that I still had in my stash. Top stitched the whole thing and added the black waistband at the bottom. Now I could sew the whole jacket together, basically having finished all pieces of the puzzle and now being able to put it together. The only detail now remaining are the studs all across the jacket that I simply made using buttons. The grey ones with engraving for the armor pieces and the shiny ones for the cuffs. Now with the jacket completed, I moved on to the shirt. The maiden part is made out of a jersey, while the collar and trim is made out of the same fleece fabric as the jacket, and, more importantly for the shirt, the hood, that I could now sew on. For the pieces on the collar, I used the same technique as with the details for the cuffs. Foam decals with a golden bead in the middle that I attached with snaps. The tassel on the back was made by wrapping yarn around some cardboard, tying it together and dyeing the gradient with fabric stain that needed 4 whole days to dry. But after that, I could sew it onto the bow thingy that I had crocheted before and attach it the same way all removable parts are attached to this cosplay. Snaps. The green trim on the bottom of the shirt was simply made with fleece that I hand sewed onto the bottom of it. I didn't realize in time that my camera was out of batteries for the majority of making the bag, but here's footage of me sewing on the strap made out of faux leather that I then painted with the same gold fabric paint and then added the buckle that I made out of craft foam. The ball on his belt, which I believe is meant to be a traditional Chinese embroidered silk ball, was made by painting a clear plastic Christmas ornament and gluing buttons onto it, mainly because of time crunch reasons. Though I do hope to someday find a tutorial of how to make one of those embroidered balls to make an actual one. The belt itself is made of the remnants of an actual belt that I had left over from a different project. I originally tried closing it by just using snaps since the amount of the belt that I had left was rather short, but that did not hold in the slightest, so I sewed a new buckle onto it. The pants weren't made too different from the hoodie. First, I cut the pieces out of the same fleece, and then I painted the details onto the green piece. For the pattern itself, I used my projector and traced it with chalk. The cuffs on the pants were made in pretty much the exact same way that the cuffs from the hoodie were made, down to the same way that the foam details were attached. The 2 pieces of cloth he has on the backside of his pants were made using just random green fabric that I still had left over, that I then sewed together and painted. His gloves were, for gloves, relatively easy to make since they don't have individual fingers, so I just traced my hand up to the part where the gloves need to go and cut the fabric out. The black parts of the glove are made from a stretchy jersey, while the grey part is made from the same fleece that I've been using. I painted the black cross onto it with a fabric marker because I started to get lazy at this point. He wears a small ribbon with what looks to be a lion charm on one of his wrists, and to make that I crocheted a wristband that I crocheted a bell into since I don't really have a way to make that lion charm. for his necklace choker thing, I had to figure out a way to make it attach to my neck without an actual closure. So I made the choker itself out of 2 layers of craft foam that I sandwiched a piece of wire into. That way I can easily bend the wire to my neck and it stays on without any problems. Since I'm not really good at styling wigs, I didn't actually record any of it, so we're moving on to the final piece of this cosplay, which is the lion headpiece with his pyro vision on it. Now, for visions of pretty much any other nation, I can just make them by using my button press. However, since leeway visions are square, I can't use that tactic since I can currently only make round buttons. So I've needed to find a way to make the vision and the lion piece without a 3D printer or anything of the sort, so I used perler beads. I first made a pixel art template, and then using multiple layers of perler beads that I then hot glued together. Because of the way that I made this has honestly become one of my favorite pieces of this entire cosplay. Speaking of, the cosplay is now finished, so here's the final result. I genuinely do like this cosplay a lot. It is incredibly comfy and pretty easy to wear for a Genshin Impact cosplay. Gaming's design first intimidated me a lot due to the many details, but it genuinely was doable. So I do hope this video can inspire you to tackle a project that you might be intimidated by. Thanks for watching.